How is everyone doing? Welcome to the Sunday Night Potluck. This is my little homage to what we might call, 1970s Baptist life and how I grew up. So, who's ready for the opening hymn? I got something selected. I sent it to Elaine for inspection earlier today. Make sure it was okay. Here we go. We sang this morning in church. I thought, oh my goodness, this takes me back. Hadn't heard this in probably since my childhood. Make sure to turn it up.
In shady green pastures so rich and so sweet, God leads his dear children along. Where the waters won't flow, bathes the weary one's feet, God leads his dear children along.
Who remembers this one? Put it in the chat.
Some through the waters, some through the flood, some through the fire, but all through the blood. Some through great sorrow, but God gives a song in the night season and all the day long. Sometimes on the mount where
who remembers the chorus at
so
least?
bright, God leads his dear children along.
My goodness.
Sometimes in the valley in darkness of night, God leads his dear children along.
Especially the chorus.
Some through the waters, some through the flood, some through the fire, but all through the blood. Some through great sorrow, but God gives a song in the night season and all the day long. Those sorrows be.
So I don't know, Laura, do you remember that one? I don't know. Oh boy. Laura says not I. Really? Oh, I remember that, especially the chorus. I remember it for sure. It's a good one. So it's called God Leads Us Along is the name of that. When we sang that this morning, went right back to my childhood. So I just thought it would be fun to share that with you today. Do you like the hymns? Put it in the comments if you like the hymns. Okay, so those of you who are on social media, you may have seen all the hubbub recently about an influencer couple who killed their child last week, and then they monetized it for clicks. Basically, it's a very public example of an act that happens every day. And I'm not going to get into all of the thing, but it was basically like they first posted a video of, hey, we're pregnant, here's our ultrasound, and then they posted a video of, here's the results of our genetic testing. Oh no, our child has version of Down syndrome. And then a very long explanation as to why they wanted to justify murdering their child. And I'm not going to show you any of that because you've already monetized it for clicks and I don't want to participate in all of that. But, I'm not here to say that this was a brave decision. I think it's murder. I think this couple needs to repent of their sins. What you're feeling is conviction and remorse. That's what that feeling is. Let me put a name to that. And then X responded by flooding the internet with pictures of children who have children and adults who have Down syndrome, who weren't aborted by their parents, and lots of positive, happy stories and pictures and how people's lives are blessed and enriched. And a civilized society doesn't kill the most vulnerable among us. And what do we do as Christians? We pray, we trust God, we let things play out, we value the unborn dignity. And to be honest, I think a society will collapse when we lose the humanity of the most vulnerable. We don't kill them, we don't kill children in the womb, and that's what we are up to. But what I really want to talk about is an emerging debate among pro-life people. And it's something that I think I'm changing my mind about. And I really want to talk about the rise of the abolitionist movement, which I think would see itself as a different stream than rather than a substream of the pro-life movement. I think that they would say that there's kind of three streams. There's the abortion people, there's the pro-life, the traditional pro-life stream, and then the abolitionist is like a third option. It's something else. But we will be having on All the Things in a few weeks somebody from the abolitionist perspective. And it's the first time that we've platformed somebody from that perspective. We're going to expose it to people and let you guys know about it. And so that should be an interesting and educational discussion. And I did a video a couple of years ago when I first heard about abolitionism, and you can go check it out. I think it's posted both on the Center for Biblical Unity site as well as my Theology Mom channel. I think it's mirrored both places. And basically, I just played clips in a conversation with Sam Say, who's kind of in the trailer park of apologetics. He's an acquaintance of ours. He's a friend of ours. And someone that we've had on the show, and he's a very high profile pro-life person. And it was a video of him talking to Kristen Hawkins, who's the head of Students for Life. And they were talking about abolitionism. And that was really kind of my first exposure to this perspective. And so for the last couple of years, I've been listening to more and more abolitionist content and really trying to understand their point of view and their come from better. Now, I still feel like I did a pretty fair job of introducing people to the perspective using that sort of maybe clunky device. But again, at that point, it was just all new for me. I didn't even really hardly know what it was. And so I was still at the very, very beginning of my journey and understanding it. So Laura says she went to a whole conference on the abolition pro-life perspective. Okay, great. Karen says she's not heard of abolitionism. Most people that I talk to about it say that, Karen, they don't even know, what are you talking about? Like, I don't even know what this is. I've only ever heard of the term used in the context of slavery. What are we talking about here? So basically what the abolitionist perspective is they think that the standard pro-life position is a compromise position. They want to criminalize abortion. And they want to criminalize not only the people who do the abortions, the doctors, they want to criminalize people who send the medicines through the mail. They want to criminalize all aspects of abortion, including, and this is where it gets controversial, they want to open the door to prosecutions against mothers who kill their children. And they see their approach as being rooted and grounded in the gospel first. That they think that the only way out of what they call child sacrifice, which is their preferred term for abortion, is that the only way out of child sacrifice as a culture is repentance and turning to the gospel. These people are not pragmatists. These people are not interested in placating the public square for the sake of getting along and appearing reasonable. Rather, their position is we should be clear and confident and trust God that the abolition perspective is the correct position and he will honor that. And so they want to criminalize all aspects of abortion because they believe in most cases these women are acting with intent and planning, and that is the very definition of murder, that they are going and they are making appointments, forethought, that's the word I'm looking for, with intent and forethought to murder their child. And or they order the pills through the mail. These actions reflect intent and forethought. And they say what we are doing by not prosecuting women is creating a special class of people who can be murderers, a special class of murderers who have immunity from prosecution. And they would say that is an injustice according to God's justice standards. And so they think the mainstream pro-life position of Students for Life and pro-life entities, they will not prosecute women. They want to create a group of people who have immunity to murder. And in the beginning, I was like, what? What are we talking about? Like, I've never thought about this, never considered this. This seems very extreme to me. I don't know what to think about this. And again, they are not concerned about pragmatism. They do not care that, well, that'll never get passed. That'll never happen. They're unmoved by that. They're like, no, we need to draw a line in the sand of what's right and what's wrong. And at some point in the history of America, there were abolitionists who are in the small minority, and they said the incremental approach to abolishing slavery isn't working. It's taking decade upon decade upon decade. In the meantime, people are enslaved, and this is a wrong, and it's a violation of God's justice standards. It's a violation of God's law against man snatching and enforced conscription, and Christians need to stand against it. And it doesn't matter if we're in the majority. It doesn't matter if we're even in a big minority. Even if we're in a tiny minority, we should stand against it, start calling it out as sin, be a prophetic voice within the culture, and do what we can to try to lobby for the right thing. That's their position. So they are completely unmoved by any argument about, well, that'll never pass. No, the majority of people will never get behind that. They don't care. They simply want to stand for the biblical thing. And in their minds, the biblical thing is consistency. The pro-life movement is comfortable saying that abortion is murder. What they're not comfortable with, mainstream pro-life movement is not comfortable with prosecuting mothers for murder. And this is one of the major points of contention of the abolitionist movement, is that there needs to be consistency with the biblical text. And they often will advocate for what are called equal protection laws. So they want laws that protect the child and the mother equally. Now, if a mother was forced to abort her child against her will, like let's say it was a human trafficking situation, or her boyfriend poisoned her drink with a abortion drug, and she didn't want to kill her child, she would not be culpable for that action, but the boyfriend would, the human trafficker would. And so they want more rigorous laws for prosecution. Let me play a little clip, because one of the issues in the abolitionist community is that they see the standard mainstream pro-life establishment, these ministries that have millions of dollars worth of a budget every year, and they pay their public spokespeople, a lot of money. Kristen Hawkins, Lila Rose, they get a nice, healthy salary to be out there in public and do what they do. And I think that These are the approved voices of the pro-life movement, but the abolitionists contend that the establishment of the pro-life movement actively tries to prevent laws from prosecuting women. Rather, they see women as being victims. And abolitionists say, no, these women are not victims. They are acting with intent and forethought to murder their child. So put your questions in the chat. I'm going to play a little clip from a recent Republican Texas GOP meeting where someone stood up to make a change, recommend a change in the GOP platform when it came to pro-life issues. And you'll see how the pro-life establishment, this person who's from the pro-life establishment, is trying to close the door on the abolitionists.
My name is Amy O'Donnell. I'm the Executive Director of Texas Alliance for Life. I'm a delegate of Senate District 14, and I'm here to amend Pro-Life Priority 8. And there is some great language in the Pro-Life Priority 8, but right now we're encouraging people not to support it unless we can get this language out. And that is...
It's a 9.
9.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, yes. So what we would like to see taken out is right there. Everything else is great. If we cannot get this language taken out, the group pushing that language is trying to open the door for criminalizing abortion for women.
Ma'am,
with
you're
the
not...
threat of...
So the language she's wanting to take out is equal protection language, which is the kinds of laws put forward by abolitionists. And she wants crossed out the penal code that would bring along penalties and the tools of enforcement. So let me fast forward a little bit because he's going to call out of order and he's going to wait for a second. And do I have a second? All right, they get a second. All right, here we go.
What I would like to request is that we take out and equal protection and then repeal Penal Code Sections 1906, 2212, and Civil Practice and Remedies Code Section 71.003. Those laws, Texas Alliance for Life work to put exceptions for women so that we go after abortion providers, holding them accountable, but that we support women and help them choose life.
So she's wanting to advocate for prosecution of this mail order chemical abortion pills, human trafficking. Like, she's okay with going after all of those people, which great, I agree. But the pro-life establishment, which she represents, sees women as victims, and so they ought to be immune from prosecution. So that's the basic argument, is kind of this appeal to, you know, they're already hurting. We don't want them to abort their children. If we start prosecutions, it'll make them abort all the more. Let me address Elaine's question here, because it is clarifying. Like, are we talking about an automatic penalty, automatic judicial outworking in each suit, murder, manslaughter, accidental? Yes. So just like any other death, there would be investigation. There would be a looking into it. What happened? Is there evidence of, the woman through her own personal email contacted this place to get the chemical abortion pills, or she called on her personal cell phone to make the appointment? There would be an investigation. There would be looking at facts. There would be, was the boyfriend involved? Did the child die against the mother's will because the boyfriend poisoned her drink? Like, there would be an investigation, just like there would be an investigation of any other death. So it's not an automatic thing, and we would have to look at each case and have it be properly investigated. Now, I think that for me, in the beginning, I had never thought about this. I'd never heard of it. It was all new. So I started dialoguing with a friend about it, who does kind of debates and does a lot of work in debating and that sort of thing. And I said, hey, can you help me kind of analyze these arguments? And someone in the trailer park of apologetics of like, hey, can we talk about this? And so we were sending each other videos back and forth, trying to understand the point of view and what the arguments are. And I think at the end of the day, I have to just be honest that I think the abolitionists have the correct argument. I think that now that they do have somewhat of a PR problem, they can come across on social media as being fairly ungracious at times. But I think that that's true of every movement, every ministry. We've seen people weaponize our content in ways that Monique and I are like, yeah, it's not really consistent with the ethos that we're trying to promote, but it does happen. But if I'm just looking at the arguments, I think that abolitionists have the more consistent argument. They are trying to take the principle of murder, and implement it consistently. And here is another thing that is really like causing me to rethink my position is if you go on X or TikTok or some of these other platforms, there's an entire world and culture of celebrating abortions and posting abortion celebratory videos. And I am not going to play any of those here because I think they're soul damaging. I think they're demonic, and I feel sad for these people. And I feel sad for the children. I feel sad that these moms are so deceived into such a deep lie. And I think the abolitionists raise a really good point that when you are at that level, like you need repentance, you need the forgiveness of God, you need the gospel. And I've known enough people in my life who have lived through abortion. And I want to say anybody who's watching this, if you have committed an abortion, if you murdered your child, there is forgiveness for you. Turn to Jesus. That's why you need Jesus. There's healing and help available. Go to your local pregnancy resource center. They will help you find a Bible study and a group to get a biblical perspective on what you have walked through. If you are a dad who has had your child murdered through this process, go to your local public pregnancy resource center, get help, get support. There are support groups for you as well. You have also been impacted, traumatized, and injured by this. Child sacrifice is a deep and profound sin. And there is also forgiveness available through the gospel, through Jesus Christ. And there is hope and healing and restoration available. So I want to say that very clearly, but I think that what the abolitionist position, if I'm just looking at the position, what has changed, one of the things that has changed my mind, in addition to Bible study, is this entire culture of abortion celebratory videos. These women, on some level, many of them do seem to know it's a child. They'll parrot the talking points of, oh, it's just a clump of cells, but there's a growing awareness in that culture of this is a baby. They'll post pictures of the baby in its murdered state. It's gross and demonic and really, really just sad. And these women are acting with malice and forethought, intention, and they are intentionally harming their children. And I think that what the abolitionists are advocating for is just the normal judicial law and order process to also be applied in the area of child sacrifice and child murder. And so this is the emerging debate among Christians. And so you might start seeing this more and more. There's a pretty big channel, Abolitionists Rising, on YouTube. Their videos are actually, I think, very well done. Now, people have, all kinds of opinions about them, and I'm not here to arbitrate that. I am simply looking at the arguments, and I do think that the arguments they're better arguments than the standard pro-life position. Now, again, abolitionists do not care about the practicality of it. Their strategy is, we're going to draw a line in the sand, just as Christians did 200 years ago. We don't care if it's unpopular. We don't care if it's a tiny minority of people. We are going to say slavery is wrong. These modern abolitionists are saying child sacrifice is wrong. We are not going to participate in it. That's their position. And so that's something you might encounter. You might run into these people and see their videos online, and just wanted you to be aware of this kind of growing fracturing in the pro-life community. And again, I think abolitionists, I want to be fair to them, I don't think they would say that they are part of the pro-life community. They are not a subset. They are their own thing. But I'm using that term in like in a more wide way of people who want to stand for the vulnerable and the unborn. All right, friends. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the Southern Baptist Convention, shall we? There is so much action, I don't know what to call it, on my social media in the last week about the events happening in the Southern Baptist Convention, the big vote that happened this past week. I'm going to try to explain a few things and share some of my perspectives, but I made several posts, and boy, high level of interaction on all the posts. So it seems to be a high interest topic. So it's not really one that I'm interested in, but it seems like a lot of people are. So first of all, I want to make it very clear that I am not a Southern Baptist. We don't have too many Southern Baptist churches out here in California. There's some, but they're just not as popular as they are in other parts of the country. And so I personally have like no direct interest in this debate. Like, I have nothing at stake. My church is not part of the conversation. The second point I want to make is that I find Southern Baptist polity to be very complicated. And so I might make minor mistakes in this conversation. I'm going to try to say everything correctly. I had a conversation with a messenger who was there for the vote this week, and I asked some clarifying questions so that I don't make a complete fool of myself. But I will freely admit I am not a Southern Baptist, and Southern Baptist polity is very complicated. So I'm going to try to say everything correctly, but I might make tiny mistakes. Okay. So I think I understand what they're debating, and I'm going to try to just focus on the issue rather than the polity. All right. I do also want to say that other denominations are facing a similar conversation that they're having in the Southern Baptist Convention. The PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, who are a more conservative break off of the PCUSA. The Presbyterians are essentially elder-led, plurality of elder-led churches. They have their own confession, the Westminster standards, and they believe in infant baptism, and they are confessional. They're not low church or anything like that. So both the SBC and the PCA are wrestling with this. And I'm sure there's other denominations who are too. I think some non-denominational churches are wrestling with some of these issues. So there is some universality in talking about this. If you want to know my position on this issue, I did write a blog post yesterday, kind of summarizing my 30-year journey on the issue of women in ministry. You can go check that out on my website. Just click on blog and you'll be able to see it. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I'm only going to go through one section of it. But if you want the big picture of my personal position, you can go there. I think that the first thing you need to understand is that what is happening in the SBC is a manifestation of a fracturing that is happening among complementarians. And to be a complementarian is to it is to believe that the local church ought to be guided by elders. That's like the most foundational idea. That, and that men and women are different. we have different physical design. We are made for different purposes, and we are also made for different roles and functions. Okay. And how that plays out in the life of the local church is that the local church is to be run by qualified male elders. That's like a rough and ready kind of back of the envelope definition of complementarian. And I know somebody's going to come on here and say, well, you didn't bring out this little nuanced thing. I'm just giving you a very, very basic, big picture understanding. Okay. So there is a certain fracturing, though, that is happening among complementarians. And what I mean by that is there are certain like general things that all the complementarians agree on, that, you know, churches should be male elder led, and that men and women are different. They're not interchangeable, blah, blah, blah. There's a book out that just came out a few weeks ago called Complementarianism, a Continuum of Perspectives on Men and Women in the Church. And this is kind of one of those interactive books where people from different perspectives are all interacting. But what makes this book different is this isn't like, well, we got egalitarians on one side and complementarians on the other. No, this is just the 14 shades of complementarianism. Okay. And there is this fracturing that is happening among complementarians that say, yeah, we agree on these certain foundational things, but we disagree on how to implement them and, you know, how to practice them. Okay. And so what is happening in the SBC at the 30,000 foot level is a manifestation of this fracturing. That's also true in the PCA and in your local non-denominational church, is that they might agree about qualified male elders. They might agree that men and women are different, have different purposes and roles and functions. They might agree with all of that, but they are practicing a lot of different shades of how does that work itself out in the local church. And that's what's happening. That's the big picture. That's what you have to know. So they have this foundational agreement. The debate is over functions and tasks. All right. And so these are the kinds of questions that I'm getting on my social media is, can a woman talk about the Bible on a podcast? Can she participate in distributing the Lord's Supper? Can she read the scripture from the platform? Can a woman serve on a committee where other men are present? Can we have wives of elders sit in on the elder meetings and kind of weigh in on different issues? Maybe they don't make the final decision, but they're weighing in on discussions. Can a woman share her testimony? Can she share her testimony and read scripture at the same time? Can she teach a mixed gender adult Sunday school class? Can women serve as leaders in the youth group? And at what age should women stop teaching teenage boys because they should be considered men? These are the kinds of questions that PCA churches, SBC churches are wrestling with because of the fracturing that is happening among complementarians. Again, they are not debating roles. They are debating functions and tasks. Are you with me? This is, if you do not understand this point, you will not understand what is happening in the SBC and the PCA and other places. All right. So so this is why, like, I posted a survey. Now, I think it's a debatable point as to how accurate this survey is, but I think it's kind of interesting that this survey said that, notice the wording here, 81% of Southern Baptists think believe that a woman should be allowed to preach a sermon to the entire congregation, even if she's not serving as pastor. So what this is talking about is the function and the task. It is not talking about the role. So, and according to this, 81% agree or strongly agree with the statement that a woman ought to be able to preach. Because the idea here is that, well, as long as the church is governed by male elders, why shouldn't a woman be able to preach? And this is what the SBC is dealing with. Now, let's say this survey is wildly off, okay? 81%. Let's say this is just wildly off, totally inaccurate. Let's just say it's just 50%. Let's say it's 40%. Friends, that's still a big number. That is a culture in the SBC that is confused. And it is good for them to debate this point, to try to get clarity about it, because they are trying to figure out, well, even within the context of men being elders, can we have women preachers? So there's a new documentary put out by John Harris called The Battle for the Bible. You can look it up on YouTube. It came out last week as the messengers were going to the annual meeting. And he's really summarizing the problem. I'm just going to play the first few minutes so that you can get a taste of what the SBC is going through in having these women in the pulpits. And apologies to John. I'm trying to promote your video here. I don't know John Harris. Very fine work that he did in this video. Hopefully people will go check it out. I'm not trying to infringe on your copyright or anything. Hopefully he doesn't come for me. But go watch the video. Go watch the whole thing. I would encourage you to do that if you want to understand these matters more. All right, here we go.
I'm reminded of the first sermon I had the joy of preaching with you when I joined the team this summer.
This class is called Bible Study Adults 101.
In his book, God Has a Dream, Desmond Tutu wrote, "I have a dream," God says.
Pastor Casey asked me this morning to bring the final message. We're going to look at 1 Corinthians.
I always think of the book of Ruth as like the Hallmark movie of the Bible.
That's the emotional atmosphere of our passage today. We're going to be in John 13.
Our sermon is going to come out of the book of Luke.
David said in Psalm 22, "Save me from the mouth of the lions."
Acts 2 gives us a really, really good picture of what a healthy church is supposed to look like.
I need my Bible to preach.
And I'm also preaching from that study on Sunday mornings.
I went to seminary, and I believe I'm a better pastor for it.
You have to prepare to give the word.
We have women reverends, we have women ministers. Think about Pastor Margaret Green. Listen, in a church with more females than males,
we are always worthy.
This was not a wrong thing to do.
It's something that God ordains and writes for us.
I know I've jumped around scripture quite a bit today. I hope y'all are having fun. That's what happens when you let a lady talk up here.
Pastor Michelle, why does the Bible not tell us more?
In Hebrews 11 today, which is going to tell us about
a long line that includes Moses, Amos, Jeremiah, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Desmond Tutu, and Mother Teresa.
That one was ouchy. I'm like, oh.
We are going to learn about being theologically sound.
I dove into the content.
And sometimes as a preacher, I wrestle with pulling up the whole chapter.
This is Reverend Schul's pulpit, and I thank God for him for this opportunity to be behind the sacred desk. Will you pray with me?
Preach your word. Use me as a vessel.
Speak through me, Lord.
Stand up in me, God. Speak through me, God.
Amy Semple McPherson exemplified the power of a woman called to boldly proclaim the gospel, breaking down barriers for women in ministry.
But Jesus also modeled for his followers a life lived without barriers. and they discover their oneness.
In a world full of too much division, we have to hear the call that the church is for the world.
I can feel it. It's a gut feeling.
I have a confession to make.
My thoughts are also inspired by God.
I don't always like reading the Bible.
And it's all scowls and hellfire and damnation. And
you're just asking for trouble.
The scriptures are silent concerning Bathsheba. What about Bathsheba? Her story, her journey, her pain is often unheard, unspoken, and it fades to the background as King David's takes center stage, but not today.
Whatever it may be.
Okay. We won't watch Beth Moore. That gives you a flavor of how John Harris opens his documentary. And I think what he's trying to accomplish there is just to show, like, hey, this isn't just one or two churches. Like, there's a significant number of churches where this is an issue. And in the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, which is the kind of confessional document that guides the SBC, it says very clearly that men should be pastors. Okay. And so these churches will say, well, we're not violating anything in the Baptist Faith and Message. Our elders are all men. It doesn't say anything about women not preaching. It doesn't say anything. So Al Mohler, who is still very influential in the SBC, proposed an amendment that they amend the Baptist Faith and Message to include not just the title of pastor, be only a man, but all functions, tasks associated with being a pastor would also be only for men. Now, I have questions as to whether or not this is really going to solve their problem, but I think it's good that they're debating it. The amendment passed by like 75% to 25%. Now, the SBC people that I've talked to feel, first of all, they feel like it's really a step in the right direction that the Mohler amendment passed. And that passed by a lot. Now, my acquaintance who was there as a messenger said that there were 11,000 people, messengers there at the conference, but only about 8,000 voted. So, there's a significant number of messengers that didn't even vote on the amendment. So we don't know where those people stand. Another good thing in this is that the new president that was elected, Willie Rice, I think is his name, seems to be supported by very conservative people within the SBC. Now, that said, there are some very unfortunate clips of Pastor Willie Rice from like 2020, 2019, where he is full on critical race theory, like he's totally in. But I've been told by people within the SBC that Willie Rice he saw the error of his ways. He repented of that. He changed his mind. And so he is kind of aware of what subversiveness can look like within the SBC. And they feel like he is a good person to lead the SBC in this season. And so next year, they will have to vote on it again. It has to pass 2 years in a row. And so Willie Rice will have some work to do to try to get the votes together, get enough representation from the messengers to come to try to get the amendment to pass. And if it passes, it would change the wording in their constitution, if you will, in their confession. And so I think that that's kind of the road ahead for the SBC. Now, there was an interesting article by Denny Burke, who is in the, I would say, in the conservative camp. But keep in mind that like almost all SBC churches are complementarian. So now we're just debating shades of complementarianism. Okay. So this article by Denny Burke is kind of interesting. And it's called "Can Women Be Pastors?" You can go look it up for yourself. But he goes through, what's interesting about it is he goes through Sam Storms, who is a charismatic, but he's also a complementarian. And he talks about the differences between his position and Sam Storms's position. But some of the wording is also worth noting here, is because here's the original Baptist Faith and Message from 1925. And it says the scriptural offices are bishops or elders and deacons. And then in 1963, they changed the wording to pastors and deacons. And then in the 2000 version, it kept with pastors and deacons. While both men and women are gifted for service in the church, the office of pastor is limited to men as qualified by Scripture. So this was their attempt in 2000 to bring clarity to the matter. But we still don't have clarity, because now we are debating tasks, okay? We are debating what people are allowed to do. And some of the, I actually think the old wording is better. It's more biblical, as bishops, elders, and deacons. Those are using the root words in the Greek. I think that some of the confusion has been entered into the conversation here over the introduction of the word pastors in 1963, changing from elders and bishops to pastors, because pastors is actually a different word in Greek. It is about shepherding. Okay. And so what some complementarians have done is they say, well, only elders have to be men, but shepherding is a gift in Ephesians 4. God gave those who are apostles, preachers, evangelists. Well, the word for pastor there is connected to the word shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd. Shepherding is a gift, not an office. And so they would say that some complementarians would argue, well, women can be shepherds because spiritual gifts are open to all. And so if shepherding is a gift, then some women can be shepherds. And so they would say that not all, while all elders must also be shepherds, not all shepherds can be elders. Okay. And so this is how some complementarians, and again, remember the big picture concept we had at the beginning, is that what's happening here is a fracturing of complementarianism. And so some complementarians see shepherding as a gift. Sam Storms would see it as a gift. People that are in that stream would see it as a gift. So they would say, yeah, we can have women pastors or shepherds because they're not elders. You see, it's a different word. Elders and deacons are offices. And this is where Burke and Sam Storms would agree that elders and deacons are offices and they should be men. And Sam Storms would say, well, all elders in some sense must also be shepherds, but not all shepherds must be elders. But because the Baptist Faith and Message uses the word pastor, on which is connected to the word shepherd in Greek, but they have used that to refer to the office of elder, which is a different word, episkopos. This is where some of the confusion comes, and this is why we are having some of this fracturing. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And so what we are seeing here, and this is why I wrote in my blog post, that a lot of this problem is a distinctly kind of modern American Protestant problem. These are not so much problems when you get into the more sacramental streams of like Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and classical Anglicanism. Because there's a very clear line, men are priests. Men are priests, that's it. But they have much more freedom over other things, like women can teach in seminary. I've had Dr. Jeannie Constantinou on my podcast. She's a very respected Eastern Orthodox scholar, has taught in seminary for decades. And that's not a problem in those more sacramental streams. You can have a woman teach a mixed adult mixed gender class and all of this, because in the sacramental stream, they're like, priests are women, or priests are men. Men are the ones who administer the sacraments. They're the ones who shepherd souls. They're men. They're men, they're men, they're men. That's it. Okay. But then other things are open to conversation. Then that's more based on giftedness. But when we get into like what I'm going to call more low church Protestant streams, non-denominationalism, Baptists, it becomes a little bit tricky, because there's rather than making the sacraments as like the central focus of the worship service, there's this shift that happens where the preaching of the word becomes the high point, it becomes the apex of the worship service. And so if that's the real thing that is the apex of the worship service, then that's why I think there's more debate about whether or not women, it's appropriate for women to be doing that, because then it kind of seems like they're functioning like priests, if you will. And so again, I think that the sacramental traditions bypass some of these problems because they have this clear demarcation about what priests do, and it's more about the sacraments and shepherding, and there's just a firmer line there. These are more issues where we start parsing this kind of minutia in lower church context because of the more memorial approach to the ordinances, and we center the preaching of the word. Now, that's my own theory. That's a theory. That's an opinion. Okay. People are free to disagree with that opinion. That's a perception. That's a observation. All right. This is what I think. Okay. And I think that is part of the dynamics of what makes this so tricky, and then why we are asking these kinds of questions about, well, can women read scripture, and can women teach mixed gender classes and all of this? It's like, because then, well, what is a pastor exactly? What is his function? What is his role? If everything is centered on the preaching, which it is in low church traditions, then it makes sense to me, at least, why they want to guard that from women. Whereas that's not as much of an issue in the more ancient faith or sacramental traditions. So those are some of my thoughts about why it has become such a hot button issue. Okay. Now I want to make a comment or thought about, and go ahead and put your comments and questions in the chat, because I'm going to start wrapping this up. But the whole thing about like women preaching in a low church context. I'm not going to speak in sacramental traditions because I feel like they've got their position more worked out. But what do we do in Protestantism, and especially in these lower church kinds of traditions where we've centered the teaching component of being a pastor and just really making that like the main thing? I used to kind of hold a position of like, well, as long as there's male elders, it would be okay for women to preach. In fact, if you go on the internet, there's probably sermons of me preaching. I did 3 sermons probably 8 years ago. at 2 different churches. I did 2 sermons at one church and then a sermon at a third church. So 8 to 10 years ago. And those might be on the internet somewhere. And I felt okay about doing that at the time because they were churches that were elder led and those elders were men. And so because I held this kind of one shade or one version of complementarianism, to me that wasn't really an issue or a problem. I've grown less comfortable with that since then. I don't think I would. I know for sure I wouldn't do it again. Monique and I have a policy between ourselves that we don't do pulpit ministries on Sunday mornings if we're invited to speak at a church. If a church wants to have us on a Sunday, we talk to the pastor and make sure that there's still a sermon, that we're not the main thing. If he wants to interview us for like 15 minutes about our story or our experience, we're okay with that. But we should not be the main thing or the main focus. There should still be a sermon. And so that's kind of how we've handled things. And I think that I've had a change of view on this, but I can also recognize that there is diversity among complementarians. And I think that what the SBC is wrestling with now is, are we going to codify one particular version of complementarianism? Is it not enough just to have male elders, but are we going to start to codify certain practices? That's really what both the PCA and the SBC are wrestling with right now. And I think that what's difficult is that some of the rhetoric is that some of this diversity among complementarians is just 100% biblical compromise. Some of it might be, but some of it might not be. And really a big question is like here's just one tweet. Let me just show you this one tweet, just to show you a mindset that's out there on social media. SBC family, if your pastor stands up and makes one of these arguments tomorrow, it's time to find a new church. Now, some of these I would agree, like, that's kind of troubling. Okay. The Bible supports female pastors. Yeah, I think that would be problematic. Down with patriarchal oppression. Yeah, I think that's just, there's been the universal teaching of the church of male priests, male pastors. Like, that's not patriarchal oppression. That's just how the church is universally understood and how to interpret the Bible. Unity requires female pastors. I think that's kind of not a great take. I'm trying to think of a gracious way to say it. The Bible doesn't oppose female pastors. Well, I wish this graphic would explain that Sam Storms' position is talking about the technical definition of the word pastor being grounded in shepherding, and that's what his position is. To me, this is kind of an ungracious way of summarizing Sam Storms' position. So that's my take on it. Female giftedness warrants. So if you have this giftedness of being a pastor, and see, this is where I think that there's this conflation of really what we're talking about as an office, not a gift. And so this is to me, a category error. What we're talking about is offices of elder and bishop, but not a gift. But that doesn't, but see, because in low churches, we're centering the preaching so much as being the primary thing that the pastor does. It makes sense to me why, like a lot of complementarians don't feel comfortable with that. Church experience justifies, like, hey, look, there's gifted called women, so they're here, we should use them. That's really not a great argument. And that it's permissible under male authority. Now, that's a position that I used to hold. I don't know if I see that as a compromising position, though. Like, do I really want to go find a new church because they say it's permissible under male authority? Maybe like we need to have a better conversation. Maybe we need to define our terms a little bit more. But can we at least like graciously acknowledge, like, hey, we're still talking about complementarians here. Let's just acknowledge that now we're having an internal family dispute on which version of complementarianism is the best version. And yeah, there's this term, some call it soft complementarianism. I'm not sure how useful that is as a term, but I think we just need to acknowledge and understand that there are different streams of complementarianism, and really what they're debating is not roles. It's not offices, it's tasks. And that's what they are trying to figure out. So that's the thing. That's what's happening from my best understanding, the big picture of the PCA and the SBC and what they're going through. Now, let me address something for maybe some younger women who might be watching this, and you're really thinking about, well, I feel like I have a gift of teaching. Where do I fit into all of this? Let me just say some things. Hopefully I don't mess this up. If your focus is on getting into the pulpit, that's the wrong focus. Like, just because you have the gift of teaching doesn't mean that your aim should be, if I don't get pulpit time, that I am somehow being unjustly discriminated against. I want to say this as like respectfully and kindly as I can, but that kind of thinking shows me that you have been shaped by feminism more than you know. You might not even be aware. And I've been there, and that happens. And I want to encourage you to rethink some things, okay? But if the thing that you are thinking about is, well, where's the place where I'm going to express my voice? Or what's the line? Like, these are questions that stem from 20th century modernist, 1960s second and third wave feminist type thinking, where you are being discriminated against or left out of the conversation because your gift isn't being used. Your gift can be used. There are things you can do. Now, you can, I did this in a season. So I had 2 seminary degrees, and I went and taught Sunday school in the 4-year-olds. Like, that was a thing. And the way of Jesus is humility. The way of Jesus is the last shall be first. And I would encourage you to think about like where the needs are, where you can serve. And that's true of everybody. Like, everybody, wherever your gifts are, male or female. Like, look at what you can do, what you can contribute. And if that's helping to bring better exegesis to your women's ministry, or starting an apologetics club for the moms at your church so that they can disciple their kids better, like, there are a lot of opportunities out there, opportunities that you can create using your education, your interest, your spiritual gifting. But if your focus is just like, well, I got to get to the pulpit and I'm being stopped and I'm being hindered from doing the thing I want to do, I would say that might not actually be the men in that church stopping you. That might be the Lord stopping you. And I want to encourage you to be faithful in the little things first and trust God to put you where he wants you. And I think that I see so many young women come on my page and make comments to this effect about how men are hindering them. And I'm like, I don't think you're thinking about this in quite the correct way. Because really what I think part of the issue can be sometimes is you just don't trust the men. Like either you don't trust that they have godly character, or you don't trust that they're biblically qualified. In that case, then maybe you should think about a different church. Talk to your husband, have those conversations. If you don't feel like your elders are biblically qualified and you can't trust them to guard the flock, and you can't trust them to bring sound teaching, then that's a different conversation. But not everybody is qualified. Not even every man is qualified to preach. Like there are very specific qualifications that very few people can really meet. Now, I do think that a lot of our churches don't have biblically qualified elders. That's a different conversation. So those are some of my thoughts. All right. What about churches in other parts of the world? Katie is asking, where there are no set offices, but are more like spread the gospel in the Church of Acts. Okay, I don't really know how to interpret this question because the church in Acts had elders. Like that's where we first see it play out. As early as chapter 6, we see deacons being assigned. The office of deacon evolves. We see elders being appointed. We were just this morning at our church, we're going through the book of Acts. We were in chapter 19 or 20, and Paul calls together all the elders in the area of Ephesus. So elders are in the book of Acts. So if you have churches in other countries who aren't practicing the biblical pattern, then that's a different question of like, well, why aren't they doing the thing that the church has done from the beginning? So even in our house church that we went to for 2.5 years, 3 years, we had elders. So I'm not sure I understand the question because just because a church is a house church, it still needs elders. People still need shepherding. People still need help in times of crisis. So Vanessa says, I think that a hard rule is helpful. As a mother, there are things I don't think I'm responsible for doing. But if my husband is not home, of course I'll step up and take over. For me, a rule is a good guide. But when there is need, of course, we are called to step up. But that's not the rule. Exactly. And like some people always want to use the example, what about contexts where there's no men? Like the gospel's going out and there's no qualified men yet. Okay, well, that's an exception. But we don't make exceptions the rule. We still have the rule. We still have the thing that we are working toward. We are going to work toward raising up nationals in that context to help them become biblically qualified elders. That might take some time, might take a few years. That's okay. In the meantime, we can have some interim measures, but the norm is still the norm. We don't make the norm based on the exceptions. Shine Marie says, I have a deep desire to teach and disciple younger women. Good for you. As Titus 2 instructs, sadly, this biblical mandate has been largely neglected in many circles. I agree. I think that's a wide open field where there could be a lot of different kinds of voices in that field. We need godly women showing practical skills that have been lost. We need godly women helping us know how to educate our children. We need godly women helping us know how to disciple our children. We need godly women helping us to interpret the Bible better. There is a wide open field of the things that could be there. Okay, what's the difference between pastors and priests? Okay, I'm really trying to be patient because I feel like I've explained this. The term pastor in Greek is related to shepherding. It is not an office. However, we have turned it into an office. We use, in our modern parlance, we use the word pastor as a synonym for what the Bible calls elder. Technically, we should be using the word elder, not pastor. Priests historically are the presbyteros, episkopos. They are coming from the elders. Okay, so what you're saying makes 100% sense. I think I've been struggling with staying in a church with unqualified elders, and that's the source of my frustration. That could be. Because what I've noticed is that women who have a lot of like, well, I want to be teaching and I want to be doing this and I want to do that. When I talk to them and I ask kind of clarifying questions, really what the root issue is they don't trust their elders. They don't really think that their elders are godly and know how to discern sound doctrine and know how to guard the flock. And they don't know what to do, and they feel frustrated. And so their solution is, well, I need to be teaching. I need to be doing this. And it's like, well, I think your real issue here is that you don't believe that your elders are biblically qualified. They are not men of good character or sound doctrine. They don't know how to defend the faith. They don't know how to fence the local church. And a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times that's kind of the more root issue. Okay, let me get into this because this is somebody texted me today with a very similar question, and I told her that I would try to address it on the stream. She says, having been on an ordination track in a low church, 90% of women should not be ordained. To be fair, most of the men looking at getting ordained shouldn't be either. Yes and amen to this. And here's another Protestant dilemma. I did not talk about this in my article. To me, this is a different, not related, but different conversation. Is that the model in a lot of non-denominational, low church, Baptist, charismatic circles is that I sense a call of God. And I make the choice to go to Bible college or get training or go to seminary. And if I have the money to write the check, then I go. And women can go to seminary, most seminaries, and take all the same classes as men in most cases. I don't think that's the best way of doing it. I prefer the more ancient faith kind of way of doing it, where you are just faithfully serving in your local church and you get noticed by the leadership because of your godly character, because of your consistency, and they approach you with higher and higher and higher levels of responsibility in the local church. And then they're working with you on getting you seminary training and creating a pathway for you into more and more ministry. I think that's a much better route, because what we do in low church Protestantism is we appoint ourselves. And this is my theory. Could be wrong. This is an opinion. This is an observation. But I think that this is one of the reasons why so many Protestant churches, low church Protestant churches, have problems with narcissists. Because they self-appoint themselves into ministry. They are not willing to do the humble work. They are not willing to do the things of slow service over time, grinding it out. And I think that model is just sort of upside down. Why do seminary schools, all right, here we go. Why do seminary school take women's money when they're not ever going to be in a leadership role? I'm a complementarian, by the way. Well, because women's money is just as green as the men's money. These people got to stay in business. That was a question I remember. I was such a smart mouth when I was in my 20s. I got appointed to be a student representative for my seminary when the accreditation people came through, the ATS. And so I was in a meeting with the ATS people trying to get accreditation. And they're kind of liberal. They accredit all the seminaries, not just the evangelical ones. And they were very concerned about the lack of female representation among the faculty. And at that time, like, I didn't even know I was a feminist. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a big problem. And none of my professors have been women, and I'm the only woman in my program. And I'm embarrassed that, I was such a feminist. But the thought, this was the exact point that I brought up to the accreditation committee is, well, my money's just as green as a man's money. Why I should be able to take every class, and I should be able to get ordained, and blah, blah, blah. This is all feminist thinking. This is all the ways that feminists think. And any exclusion is discrimination. It's unbiblical. It's, just discriminatory and all of that. It's a lot of feminist thinking. I think that seminaries would do well to partner with churches and receive students who have been biblically vetted and qualified from churches. That would be an entirely different way of doing a seminary. I actually am more in favor of a model where churches train from within, and they kind of have their own classes, and it's part of the culture, and they're training their people from within, both male and female, but then they're helping them get deployed and trained into that local church to strengthen that whole local body, rather than constantly bringing in outsiders, and every new senior pastor completely changes the whole culture, and they have the freedom to fire the whole staff that's already there and all of that. I think a much better model would be training people from within and then deploying them into ministry and seeing how they're serving, and then slowly giving them more and more responsibility, letting them explore and discern whether increased ministry is for them. I think that would be a much healthier way to do it. I think it'd be a much better way to do it. But yeah, so all right. I've talked a lot. Talked for 90 straight minutes. It's a lot of opinions. But I do want to thank you for joining me for the potluck. I hope you're enjoying these little casual conversations where I just sort of show up and talk and share my opinions on things. I hope that you will join me again next week, and you can always send me ideas of what you'd like to talk about, and I'd be happy to receive those from you. And just really glad our time together. And I'll leave you with a hymn.